I walked away from my daughter 18 years ago. Then she found me, pregnant, just like her mother was. In a single moment, I became a father and grandfather overnight. But saving them might cost me my marriage. When I was 20, I was in a very toxic relationship. She got pregnant, we moved in together, and it was horrible. It all ended when she told me my daughter wasn't mine, and I was relieved at the time. I was 20. I left. I went on with my life, I went to college, got married, and built my life. 7 months ago, a teenage girl contacted me claiming I was her father. I explained to her how she was misunderstood, but she insisted. So we took a paternity test, and she's mine. The baby that I walked off on nearly 2 decades ago is mine, and I missed all of those years. Not only that, but she was pregnant, just like her mother was at her age. Her mom kicked her out, and she found me after that. She moved in with us 5 months ago, and my grandson is now almost 3 months old. It was essentially like I'd become a father and grandfather overnight. It hasn't been smooth sailing. My wife has been supportive, but it's taken a major toll on our relationship. We went from a quiet home to sleepless nights and emotional tension. We never planned for this, and I can tell that my wife is becoming resentful even though she denies it. She doesn't want to talk about it. I need to talk about this with her because I feel her slipping away. I love my wife. I love my daughter that I'm getting to know. I love my grandson. There's so much guilt on my end because of all those years I missed. I don't know how to hold all of this at once, and I just need help. I feel guilt, confusion, and like I'm failing everyone. The text message came on a Tuesday afternoon in March, while I was sitting in my office reviewing quarterly reports. The notification popped up from an unknown number, and I almost ignored it entirely. Something made me look though, maybe just curiosity about potential spam. Hi, I think you might be my father. My name is Emma Collins. My mom is Jessica Collins, used to be Jessica Martinez. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. Jessica Martinez. That was a name I hadn't heard in nearly 18 years, a name that brought back memories I'd worked hard to bury. My hands actually started shaking as I read the message again, trying to process what I was seeing. Jessica and I had dated when we were both 20, fresh out of high school and thinking we knew everything about the world. What started as an intense attraction quickly devolved into something toxic and destructive. We fought constantly, made up passionately, then fought again. It was the kind of relationship that felt dramatic and important when you're young but looks completely unhealthy from the perspective of experience. When Jessica told me she was pregnant 6 months into our relationship, I was terrified but tried to step up. We moved in together to a cramped studio apartment that smelled like cigarettes from the previous tenant. I got a second job working nights at a warehouse to help support us. I was exhausted all the time, working days at a retail store and nights loading trucks, but I thought I was doing the right thing. Living together made our relationship problems impossible to ignore. Jessica was moody and unpredictable, which I initially attributed to pregnancy hormones. But it was more than that. She would accuse me of cheating when I came home late from work, despite knowing exactly where I'd been. She'd go through my phone, interrogate me about conversations with coworkers, and create dramatic scenes over nothing. The breaking point came when Jessica was about 7 months pregnant. We'd had another screaming fight about something trivial, and she was threatening to leave. In the heat of the moment, she shouted something that stopped me cold. "You know what? This baby probably isn't even yours anyway. I was seeing someone else when we got together." I stood there in shock, processing what she just said. The rational part of my mind knew she was probably just trying to hurt me, lashing out in anger. But the scared, immature 20-year-old part of me latched onto it as a potential escape from a situation that felt overwhelming. "Fine," I said, my voice unnaturally calm. "If that's how you feel, maybe I should just leave." I expected her to take it back, to apologize, to tell me she didn't mean it. Instead, she just stared at me with this cold expression and said, "Maybe you should." So I did. I packed my stuff that night and moved back in with my parents. I told myself I was being practical, that if the baby wasn't mine, there was no point in staying in a toxic situation. Jessica never reached out to correct what she'd said, which I took as confirmation. Looking back, I realized we were both just kids playing adult games we didn't understand. When Emma was born 2 months later, I heard about it through mutual friends. Part of me wanted to reach out, to see if Jessica had been telling the truth about paternity. But by then I'd already started convincing myself that I was better off without the drama. I was young, I reasoned. I had my whole life ahead of me. Why tie myself to someone who'd treated me so poorly? I threw myself into building a different life. I enrolled in community college, then transferred to a 4-year university. I studied business administration and worked part-time jobs to pay my way through school. I dated other people, learned what healthy relationships look like, and gradually put Jessica and the whole situation behind me. When I was 25, I met Sarah at a friend's wedding. She was smart, kind, and had this wonderful laugh that made me feel lighter whenever I heard it. We dated for 2 years before getting married, and she became the anchor that helped me understand what real partnership looked like. We bought a house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, built careers we were proud of, and created the kind of stable, peaceful life that felt like the opposite of everything I'd experienced with Jessica. Sarah and I talked about having children, but we were never in a rush. We wanted to establish ourselves financially first, maybe travel a bit, enjoy being married. There was always time later, we figured. Neither of us mentioned the possibility that I might already have a child somewhere. I'd thought about Emma occasionally over the years, wondering what she looked like, whether she was happy, if Jessica had eventually told her about me. But those thoughts felt abstract, like wondering about a character in a book. The idea that she might someday contact me directly had never seriously occurred to me. Now, sitting in my office staring at that text message, all of those suppressed thoughts and feelings came rushing back. I read the message probably 10 times, each time hoping it would say something different. But there it was, clear and undeniable. A girl claiming to be my daughter wanted to talk. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I called Sarah and asked if we could have dinner somewhere quiet that night. I needed to tell her about this before I did anything else. Sarah's reaction was better than I'd hoped but not as simple as I'd expected. She listened quietly as I explained the situation, occasionally asking clarifying questions but mostly just processing. "So you think she really could be yours?" Sarah asked when I'd finished explaining. "I don't know. Maybe. Jessica told me the baby wasn't mine, but she said it during a fight. She might have just been trying to hurt me." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, twirling pasta around her fork without eating it. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know that either. Should I respond? Should I ask for proof? Should I just ignore it?" "You can't ignore it," Sarah said firmly. "If there's a chance she's your daughter, you have to find out for sure. You'll never forgive yourself if you don't." That night, I crafted a careful response to Emma's message. I explained that the situation was complicated, that her mother had told me the baby wasn't mine, and that I'd need some kind of proof before we could move forward. I tried to be kind but firm, not wanting to get drawn into drama if this was some kind of scam or mistake. Emma's response came within hours, and it was more detailed than I'd expected. She explained that her mother had always told her I was her father but that I'd abandoned them when she was born. She said she'd been curious about me for years but hadn't known how to find me until recently, when she'd gotten access to some old documents with my full name. The message that really got to me, though, was when she said, "I'm not looking for money or anything like that. I just want to know where I come from. I have your eyes, and people always tell me I have your stubborn streak, though I've never met you to know what that means." Your eyes. Your stubborn streak. The specificity of those details made something in my chest tighten. I found myself studying my reflection in the bathroom mirror that night, wondering if a teenage girl somewhere really did look back at me with similar features. Sarah and I talked about it extensively over the next few days. She was supportive but cautious, reminding me that we needed to be careful about getting emotionally invested before we knew the truth. We agreed that a paternity test was the only way to move forward responsibly. I messaged Emma back suggesting we meet at a neutral location to discuss next steps. She agreed immediately, and we arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown the following Saturday. I was nervous walking into that coffee shop in a way I hadn't been in years. I tried to imagine what Emma might look like, but nothing prepared me for the reality of seeing her. She was sitting in a corner booth, looking young and nervous, with light brown hair and dark eyes that were unmistakably similar to my own. When she stood up to greet me, the resemblance was even more striking. She had my height, my bone structure, and yes, my eyes. But she also moved with a confidence that reminded me of Jessica, and her smile had a warmth that seemed entirely her own. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, and her voice had a slight rasp that I recognized from my own family. We spent 2 hours talking that day. Emma was articulate and thoughtful, clearly intelligent but also carrying an emotional weight that seemed too heavy for someone so young. She told me about growing up with Jessica, about a series of her mother's boyfriends who came and went, about feeling like she never quite fit anywhere. "Mom always said you didn't want anything to do with us," Emma said at one point. But she also used to say that when she was really angry, she'd tell me different things. I never knew what to believe. I explained my side of the story, trying to be honest without being too critical of Jessica. Emma listened carefully, occasionally nodding as if things were starting to make sense. I want to do a paternity test, I told her before we left. Not because I don't believe you, but because we both need to know for certain before we figure out what comes next. Emma agreed readily. We went to a testing facility that afternoon, provided samples, and were told we'd have results within a week. That week was one of the longest of my life. Sarah and I talked endlessly about what we'd do if the test came back positive. Would Emma want to be part of our lives? Would Jessica cause problems? How would this change our marriage, our plans, our entire future? When the call came confirming that Emma was indeed my daughter, I felt a combination of vindication and overwhelming guilt. I'd been right to question Jessica's claim 18 years ago, but I'd also missed my daughter's entire childhood because I'd been too young and scared to fight for the truth. I called Emma immediately to share the results. She cried when I told her, and I found myself tearing up too. We were strangers, but we were also family, and neither of us quite knew how to process that. "There's something else I need to tell you," Emma said after we'd both composed ourselves. "I'm pregnant. That's actually part of why I reached out now. I got kicked out, and I need help." The parallels hit me like a physical blow. My 18-year-old daughter was pregnant and in crisis, just like her mother had been at the same age. History was repeating itself in the most uncomfortable way possible. Emma explained that she'd been dating a boy named Marcus for about a year. When she told him she was pregnant, he'd initially been supportive, but his parents had convinced him to break up with her. Jessica's reaction had been even worse. She'd accused Emma of trying to ruin her life and given her an ultimatum: get an abortion or find somewhere else to live. "I can't do that," Emma said quietly. "I know I'm young, and I know it's going to be hard, but I want this baby. I just need help figuring out how to make it work." Sarah and I talked late into the night after that conversation. This wasn't just about getting to know my daughter anymore. This was about a pregnant teenager who needed immediate support, and we were the only family she had. "We have to help her," Sarah said finally. "I know it's not what we planned, but we can't let your daughter be homeless and pregnant." That's how Emma came to live with us 5 months ago. We converted our guest room into a nursery/bedroom combination, bought a crib and changing table, and tried to prepare for the reality of having a newborn in the house. Nothing could have really prepared us though. When baby James was born 3 months ago, our quiet, orderly life was turned completely upside down. Suddenly we were dealing with 3 a.m. feedings, diaper changes, and the complex emotional dynamics of 3 adults trying to figure out how to be a family. Emma is a good mother, but she's also 18 and dealing with her own trauma. She gets overwhelmed easily and sometimes shuts down when James cries for extended periods. I find myself stepping in to help with night feedings and diaper changes, not just because she needs the support, but because I'm trying to make up for all the years I missed with her. The hardest part, though, is watching what this situation is doing to Sarah. She's been incredibly generous and supportive, but I can see the strain in her face, hear it in her voice when she thinks I'm not paying attention. We went from being a couple with our own rhythm and priorities to being caregivers for both a traumatized teenager and an infant, practically overnight. Sarah doesn't complain directly, but I notice things. The way she retreats to our bedroom earlier in the evenings. How she started working longer hours at the office, clearly enjoying the quiet and predictability of her professional environment. The fact that we barely talk about anything except logistics anymore, who's picking up diapers, when Emma has a doctor's appointment, whether James seems to be developing normally. Our sex life has essentially disappeared, which isn't entirely surprising given that we have a newborn in the house, but it feels like more than just exhaustion. Sarah seems distant from me in a way that has nothing to do with being tired. When I try to initiate physical intimacy, she's receptive but not enthusiastic, like she's going through the motions because she thinks she should. Last week, I overheard her on the phone with her sister, and the conversation made my heart sink. "I know it's the right thing to do," Sarah was saying. "And I want to be supportive. But I feel like I got married to one person and suddenly I'm living with a completely different family. I didn't sign up for raising a teenager and a baby. I keep waiting for it to feel normal, but it just doesn't." Her sister said something I couldn't hear, and Sarah laughed bitterly. "No, he's so focused on making up for lost time with Emma that he doesn't even seem to notice how hard this is for me. It's like I'm supposed to just adapt and be grateful for the opportunity to help." I wanted to interrupt, to tell her that wasn't true, that I did notice how hard this was. But I also knew she was right. I have been so consumed with figuring out how to be a father to Emma and a grandfather to James that I haven't been taking care of my marriage. The guilt is crushing. I feel guilty about abandoning Emma 18 years ago, even though I was young and didn't know she was mine. I feel guilty about the years of her life I missed, about not being there when she needed a father. I feel guilty about James growing up without his own father around. And I feel guilty about asking Sarah to sacrifice the life we built together for a situation neither of us chose. But underneath the guilt, there's also love and joy that complicate everything. Getting to know Emma has been one of the most meaningful experiences of my adult life. She's funny and smart and resilient in ways that amaze me. When she tells me stories about her childhood, I can see glimpses of the person she might have been if I'd been around to support her. When she asks for my advice or just wants to talk, I feel like I'm finally getting to be the father I should have been all along. And James, my grandson, is this perfect little person who looks at me with complete trust and contentment. When he falls asleep on my chest during late-night feedings, when he grins at me in recognition, when Emma tells me I'm a natural grandfather, I feel a completeness I didn't know I was missing. The problem is that I want all of it. I want to be a good father to Emma, a good grandfather to James, and a good husband to Sarah. But it feels impossible to do all three things well simultaneously, and I'm terrified that my attempts to be everything to everyone are resulting in me failing everyone. Emma needs stability and support as she figures out motherhood and her own future. She's mentioned wanting to finish high school and maybe go to college eventually, but right now she's just trying to survive each day. She depends on Sarah and me not just for housing and financial support, but for emotional guidance and practical help with James. James needs consistent caregivers who can provide the attention and nurturing that will help him develop properly. As his grandfather, I want to be present for all the milestones Emma and I both missed when she was a baby. I want to read him stories and teach him to throw a ball and be the kind of stable male presence in his life that Emma never had. Sarah needs a partner who prioritizes our relationship and works with her to maintain the life we build together. She needs to feel valued and considered, not like an afterthought in my quest to make amends for past mistakes. The truth is, I don't know how to balance all of this. Some days I think we're finding our rhythm, that we're all adjusting and learning to be a family. Other days, like today, I feel like everything is falling apart and I don't know how to fix it. This morning, Sarah and I had what might have been our first real fight since Emma moved in. It started over something small. I'd forgotten to pick up groceries because I'd been helping Emma with a job application, but it escalated quickly. I feel like I'm living with strangers, Sarah said, and her voice was shaking with frustration. You're so focused on Emma and James that you barely see me anymore. When was the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about diapers or doctor's appointments? I tried to defend myself, to explain that I was just trying to help everyone adjust, but Sarah wasn't having it. I know you're trying to help, David. I know this is complicated and emotional for you. But I'm drowning here, and you don't even notice because you're so busy playing catch-up with the family you didn't know you had. She left for work without saying goodbye, and I spent the day replaying the conversation, trying to figure out where we go from here. Tonight, after Emma and James are asleep, Sarah and I need to have the conversation we've been avoiding for months. We need to talk about what this new reality means for our marriage, and whether we can find a way to make it work for everyone. I love Sarah more than I can express, and the thought of losing her because of choices I made when I was 20 is almost unbearable. But I also can't abandon Emma again, and I won't walk away from my grandson. There has to be a way to honor all of these relationships and responsibilities. Maybe that means couples counseling, or family therapy, or just setting better boundaries around time and attention. Maybe it means having more honest conversations about what we each need and how we can support each other better. Maybe it means accepting that our life will never look like what we originally planned, but that doesn't mean it can't be good in a different way. What I know for certain is that ignoring the problem won't make it go away. Sarah is slipping away from me, and if I don't act soon, I might lose the most important relationship in my life while trying to rebuild the ones I lost years ago. Tonight, we talk. Tonight, we figure out how to move forward together, or we admit that the weight of my past has become too heavy for our present to bear. The irony isn't lost on me that I'm facing almost the exact same situation I faced 18 years ago, a young woman, a baby, and a relationship under extreme stress. The difference is that this time, I'm not 20 years old, and I know what running away costs. This time, I have to find a way to stay and make it work, for everyone involved. The question is whether I'm strong enough and wise enough to do what I couldn't do the first time around.